What's up troops, it's me TheTacticalBrit, and today we're talking about Giant Shadow. Now for those of you who don't know, Giant Shadow is a free map which is going to release in December for Battlefield 1. It will be the first major DLC drop of the game because it appears that all premium content will not actually showcase itself until 2017. Now, Giant Shadow is a battle that took place in autumn 1918 and has huge historical influence on World War I. So today we're going to look at what we might be able to expect from Giant Shadow and also some history about the area and what this attack exactly was and what influence did it have on the rest of World War I. So on the Battlefield website they give us a quick synopsis of Giant Shadow, and it says that it's a battle that takes place in the cold of autumn 1918, and it says that the fighting moves out of trenches into open country where a massive crashed airship casts shadow onto the battlefield. So it looks like the scenic background of the actual map itself is going to be a crashed or destroyed airship. Now, British forces have broken through the Hindenburg Line and are now in pursuit towards an important railway centre, and fierce infantry and tank engagements ensue in the ground and the riverbanks alongside the Katu-Wusangi Railway, where the armoured train can turn the tide, and Giant Shadow will be coming free as part of a free update in December. So, let's have a look at some historical detail. What is the Hindenburg Line, first and foremost? Now, for those of you who don't know or don't watch my Tales from the Battlefield series in which I talk about historical World War I events, the Hindenburg Line was a massive line of trenches, defences, as well as armoured battlement stations such as artillery and pillboxes that was set up by the Germans during World War I as their real major defensive line in Europe. They wanted to keep the Western Front relatively safe, and this was their major way of doing it. It was one of the most effective defensive lines during World War I and held out for an excessively long amount of time, between 2 and 3 years, before any actual major ground was made in breaking the defensive line. Now, it's named after Hindenburg, who, as many of you will know from World War II history, was a World War I general at the time. As many of you will know, Hindenburg later goes on in the defeat of Germany in World War I to run the revolution from the inside of World War I Germany, which eventually led to the ascension of the Nazis, which also eventually led to him being president of Germany, or the Weimar Republic as furtherly known at the time, and eventually actually being the man who presidentially said, okay, Hitler's about to be our chancellor, and obviously it's all downhill from there. So the Hindenburg Line was named after this general who had actually devised tactically the line itself, as well as funded the line, because it was quite difficult to get World War I funding at the time when the war effort was going on. So he eventually sanctioned and tactically in place this line, and it was eventually named after him by many troops and other generals at the time. Now, the Battle of St. Quentin, or Cambrai-St. Quentin to be exact, which happened during the 27th of September 1918, was what actually forced the German defences out of the Hindenburg Line, and this was all part of a master tactician plan by a man called Marshal Foch, who had formed the Great Autumn Offensive, which was designed to take the Germans out of the Hindenburg Line. And as many people know, it succeeded, it was incredibly effective, but the Allied advance was very costly. It cost them lots of soldiers, lots of lives, and a lot of money too. Now, as they pushed them out of the Hindenburg Line, the Germans continued to fall back, and as they progressively fall back, they set up new lines of defense, new lines of defense, and new lines of defense. And eventually it was just simply a case of the Allies pushing as many men as possible into these lines, destroying them, and making the Germans form a new one until they eventually pushed them all the way back towards Germany and the region of Prussia. Now, the problem with this is that as they progressively pushed forward, the Germans eventually got the resistance that they needed to be incredibly deadly and incredibly effective. And one of these areas that they were effective in was the River Selle, which was close to Le Cateau, which is a railway station and supply station for the Germans. Now, at this point in time, this was an open field area, it was out of trenches, and it wasn't very well defended or wasn't very well offended by any particular troops. It was essentially a case of whoever got there first would have the best opportunity of setting up some form of readiness for an impending attack. This was completely open land, it was something that was quite easily to get killed on, and there was hardly any cover. British troops actually took 2 weeks to prepare an attack on this position due to the fact that St. Quentin had taken so much out of them, and they'd already suffered 140,000 casualties in the time it took for them to to actually head towards this next line with their artillery fire. The aim of the Battle of the Selle was dictated by Rawlinson's 4th Army, which attacked a 10-mile front south of Le Cateau, and the aim of this was to actually get their artillery within fireable position on a German railway and fire support position known as Al-Nouai. Now, this would be an artillery range that they needed to get within, and the Rawlinson 4th Army made incredibly slow progress. It took them 2 days to move 5 miles with their artillery, so you can imagine just how long it would take for them to actually get within a firing position. Now, after more progress was made by the 1st and 3rd Armies that were attacking the north at this time, eventually the overall fighting was pushed into open land where Germans only had 10 days to fortify their position in the open country and build up their defensive. Now, it wasn't incredibly effective, and early on the 23rd of October, Haig launched a night attack, who of course was a general at the time, with all 3 British armies, the 1st, 2nd and 4th, and this was a 6-mile British advance in 2 days, and they made heavy moves towards the Hindenburg line and the artillery position that they needed. And by the time the Battle of the Selle was over, the British were actually 20 miles behind the Hindenburg line, which nobody thought would be possible at this time during 1918 without some severe tactical importance. So that about sums up the history of the Battle of the Selle, and for the actual map itself in Battlefield 1, it looks like we're going to have lots of open land, potentially some forest or trees here and there, and potentially some artillery positions placed in and around and between. There will also be an armoured train, as we know, that will run through the map at some point, which we could presume will at least cover 2 to 3 of the objectives available on the actual map itself. It looks like an incredibly interesting update, and I'm sure it's something that's going to keep us at least remotely prompted until we see the first DLC release of Premium, which I believe is in around the region of February/March 2017, and the rest of the DLC looks like it's all going to come in 2017, and it's going to take quite a while. So, let me know if you're excited for the Battle of the Selle, which is depicted in Giant Shadow. If you are, give it a like, give me a comment in the section below, and as always guys, I'll see you again soon in another video.